Well, if you've listened to Nightmares on the Lost Highway in our 6-year history, especially paying attention to what some might call trends with my contributions, you will notice one thing that probably rises to the occasion, and that being giants. It's something my co-host Bill sometimes affectionately picks on me about. So never wanting to disappoint my buddy Bill or our audience followers out there, I come across a pretty well-documented trail about several Missouri and Arkansas Ozark region skeletal remains involving, in particular, the Army Corps of Engineers. In particular, a possible cover-up with the erection of various dams, creating Bagnell Dam, Bull Shoals, and Truman Dam, just to name a few, right here in our backyard, and flooding of hundreds of thousands of documented Native American indigenous burial caves, and even more interesting, the ones the natives called the Old Ones, the giants. So as my sister-in-law would say, buckle up, Buttercup. This one's going to be a crazy, wild, alternative history, Ozark style.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Well, I will give Eric credit. He hit the nail on the head. Well, you know, we plan what we're going to talk about in the weeks between episodes, and I thought I knew what we were going to talk about. And,
I had give him a different topic.
He'd given me another topic, and I had sort of settled in on the Virginia UFO incident. And then I think it was maybe I got off work or something, or it was later that day, whatever. But I get this text, and it's like, "Hey, buddy, hang on. You know what? I'll read it. I'll read it verbatim.
We're going officially on file record.
This is what I get."
We won't say his response back because it's just it's a family-friendly show. So,
hey, are we still on for Sunday, or do we want to wait and see what the weather does? By the way, changing my topic to one of my favorites, giants, but in the Ozarks and involving the Army Corps of Engineers, building dams and flooding regions where giant remains have been found. Found some great conspiracy things with newspaper articles and dam constructions of Bagnell, Truman, and White River Dam at Branson.
Those dam constructions.
Yeah. My response, Sunday's good. My topic is the Virginia UFO incident. So for years, is there enough out there for me to do Ozarks giants, or is there some flexibility for me to look at other giants or maybe other stuff? I covered a lot of Missouri giants in our first giant episode.
Don't make me talk about giants again.
Yeah, my first thought was immediate. This bastard,
this guy.
He picks this topic, which I have. I mean, look,
he didn't have a lot of love for it to begin with.
Giant stories are cool, and the first two episodes we did, the first episode, I covered a lot of stuff. The second time we did it, I talked about the Kandahar giant, which was a story that I like. You know, I was able to cover some other giant stuff.
Good one.
This one, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I do tackle a giant story.
Okay.
And I do, but when I talked about other Ozarks folklore, I did find a creature in Ozarks folklore that kind of interested me. So I am going to drop that in at the end after we do the giant stuff, just because I did the research and I want to talk about it.
I'm going to be very forgiving to Bill because he's being a good sport.
The giant thing, along. I searched and I searched and I searched and just, I was like, I'd find a story and then I'd be like, man, that sounds familiar. And we did this already. I'd find a story and be like, okay, this one kind of works. But then it would be like one paragraph of information and that was all. I was like, that's not enough.
Well, I will challenge our audience to hopefully stay tuned because this information that I am going to present, we have not talked upon any of these specific ones. So.
And just keep in mind that he doesn't get to pick all the episodes, so it won't all be giants every time.
50-50 chance.
Just, 4 out of the, This will be like the fourth time we've talked about giants.
Probably.
And in
Out
the
of
third
6 years.
the third full episode.
That's not even one annual giant.
It's not, but it's still the most commonly covered topic in the podcast.
All right, we're going to start off. The spark of my story. An anonymous online entry was made by an individual, a man who lives on a man-made lake up near Clinton, Missouri. Now, this is obviously one of those that was created by the Army Corps of Engineers. He reported in talking with some of the members of the Army Corps and in conjunction with some of his old family stories about ancient civilizations and how they were covered by the dam waters here in the Missouri Ozarks.
Those damn waters.
Those damn waters. Everything from entire towns in the late 1880s through the early 1900s, like we have talked about on some past episodes. One very proven one that comes to mind would be Old Lynn Creek, Missouri, up near Camdenton. That one is very well documented with many, many photos, entire books written about citizens that were given months to move out, relocate. However, they left foundations, stores, churches, cemeteries that are all now submerged, beneath the lake waters. But I'm not talking about those, the more recent civilizations. I'm talking about Native American indigenous tribes and actually civilizations before that time frame in those tribes. The ones they call the old ones, way back in history, way before the founding of the United States, way before the colonization of Jamestown, way before that guy Columbus that gets credited for discovering America, even before possibly the Vikings and the others that said to have set foot here. But before we get into the heart of the story, this online entry posed a question that really hit me home. And it's a little bit hard to answer. Why does the Army Corps of Engineers, or any military branch for that matter, have any jurisdiction or control over recreational bodies of water for civilians? The official answer: flood control, hydroelectric power, and recreation. Between 1931 and 1979, the Army Corps of Engineers built several massive dams across the Ozarks regions, essentially flooding nearly 1 million acres of land that now lies below the watery lines of massive reservoirs of water: Lake of the Ozarks, Table Rock Lake, Bull Shoals, Truman Dam, and Truman Lake. Thousands of people relocated, some from what I'll call heritage family farms that had been passed down for multiple generations. And for most, it was accepted. It was progress. They moved forward and they forgot it. But if you care to dig a bit deeper, there's more there. Now, whether it was intentional or accidental, it's caused a lot of things to be hidden and lost to time. A well-documented trail of newspaper, magazine accounts, archaeological, professional excavations, discoveries, which ironically involved the old ones, as they were called by the indigenous tribes. They were sometimes friend, sometimes foe in the stories of the natives. And these accounts that had been passed around the fire, some said these old ones had fiery red hair that kind of flared with their tempers. Often these red-haired giants ranged from 7 foot as much as 10 foot tall in stature.
I saw, was it 2 rows of teeth?
2 rows of teeth is very typical.
6 fingers on each hand.
Yes. Some relate to them as almost animalistic, but with intelligence and knowledge of even metallurgy, in particular copper, brass, or bronze weapons, some even being found with armor. Now, one of the things here in the Ozarks, branching up into Illinois, is the mounds, the great hills of earth. They exist all around us, but of course the most notable is the Cahokia Mounds, which is one of the largest pre-Columbian settlements north of Mexico, located there in Illinois near St. Louis, just over that state border. It's well documented, preserved site, featuring 120 such earthen mounds, including the 100-foot high Monk's Mound. Now, researchers and scientists agree it served as a major Mississippian culture center, housing up to 20,000 people in its peak sometime around 1100 AD. Now, the Native American indigenous tribes of the areas, they did not build these. They say in their stories, they found them and they simply reutilized them. Some of these, dotting the Ozark River bluffs, were unearthed by farmers in advancement of growth before fully understanding them. Some were reported, others were intentionally destroyed. Of those reports, often multiple giant skeletal remains would be found inside these mounds, which were constructed often of what might be called an earthen dome, with large timber supports, quarried almost block walls, ornate giant flat tiles making up the floor. There was sometimes fireplace, hearths found in some of these. There were remnants of dried herbs, berries, food, pottery, and even more intriguing, oversized axes and tools made of brass and bronze, and metal in particular, including a chest piece of armor like that of plate mail for a knight, well before metallurgy was said to have been practiced here in America. Now, these type of things kept turning up, and the Army Corps of Engineers ended up flooding the waters for them. These such discoveries had been made 2 to 3 decades prior to the dam project starting in the early 1930s. Many artifacts and remains being sent off and collected by the Smithsonian Institute, promising for further elaborate study and tests. But oddly, most were lost, misplaced.
Would you say lost in quotes?
That's a good way. Lost in quotes, yes. How in the world do hundreds of bones and artifacts get sent to the Smithsonian of all places?
In one of the most prestigious museums
that is
ever.
There to preserve history, they just lose them. That's a story for another day. But even the Smithsonian issued monthly publications reporting they had received these such things, documented that these appeared to be giant remains, some with metal weapons, some with armor, only in later decades to publicly state, nope, we never received any of those things. But you had it in your own reports that you did. Something doesn't add up. Well, consider the timing and these facts. It was as if the history we had been taught was unraveling before our very eyes. Items, civilizations, discoveries, technologies that, quite simply, shouldn't exist but did. And well before that Christopher Columbus guy, whom we were all taught discovered America. Yeah, right. Whatever. What a joke. Let's be clear on some of this. The Army Corps of Engineers, it was established back in 1802, right after the Revolutionary War. They were a military division with engineering knowledge to help build bridges, defenses, develop tactical advantages for future wars. Now, speculation. Just keep an open mind, if you will, and you see this 30 to 40 year time period of hundreds of such reports just out of the Ozark regions. Things that were seen, things that were discovered and found that completely unraveled everything that we have been taught. What do? You do damage control. You have a division of engineers who could be almost reimagined to step forward to help with the country's infrastructure, hydroelectric power grid necessary for the growth. But there they have a military connection. And if you were the government, essentially you could control the narrative and use them to clean up a mess that was getting maybe too hard to ignore. You flood millions of acres, where in the time frame from the 1890s to the late 1920s, hundreds of these strange, undocumented, misunderstood giants were being unearthed. Poof, problem solved. Couple that with the accounts of the Smithsonian apparently losing some of these same artifacts, proof of discovery and existence being wiped away, maybe they didn't want to take the fall anymore. This was the next step in controlling the narrative. Flood the caves, flood the bluffs, flood the mounds, knowing that the sludge and runoff and the mud would bury the truth, making it nearly impossible to ever locate these buried underwater sites. In an age well before GPS coordinates, and with the primary means of locating pinpoints somewhere in the middle of nowhere was left up usually to the military or those with engineering backgrounds. Just think about it for a minute. So let me roll right into this. The first dam, 1931, Bagnell Dam.
I've been there.
I've been there multiple times. At the time, it was one of the largest man-made lakes in all of the United States, flooding over 60,000 acres of Osage River Valley. What was documented, presented, and then flooded before anyone could really investigate properly goes a little like this. 1885, workers constructed a railroad bridge about 20 miles upstream from where Bagnell Dam is currently located today. A series of caves were exposed in the limestone bluffs as they were working on the railroad bridge. They were not small holes. They were large enough to walk through. Some even showed signs of human modification. The Jefferson City Tribune, September 3, 1885, ran the following account in an article. One large cave was entered. Towards the back, a grouping of very large human remains were found. The femur leg bone measured at 33 inches in length. The skull, when measured, showed a circumference of 29 inches around. These did not add up to normal-sized humans. The 33-inch femur and the size of the skull deducted the body was approximately 9 feet tall. This larger cave had been altered, carved out to be larger, levels entirely removed. The remains of a giant were found on a formation, typical a grave burial, almost like an elevated platform rather than being buried or like an accidental death. The Missouri Historical Society were contacted and they arrived to examine, unearth, and remove the remains. It can be found in a newsletter accounts from the Missouri Historical Society, and they handed the bones over to the Smithsonian Institute for further analysis. However, nothing can be found from the Smithsonian side stating they ever received them, and they are now considered deemed and lost to time. 1903. A local farmer by the name of Thomas Clarkson was clearing farmland on the North Shore area of the Lake of the Ozarks, or where it is today. There he discovered a sunken, man-made structure beneath the ground when he started excavating for a root cellar of his own there on the farm. Mr. Clarkson wrote a letter to the Missouri State Geological Society. He stated the underground structure was made of carved or chiseled large blocks, adding up to a room about 10 foot by 10 foot square with 8 foot tall ceilings. He continued, stating that when he climbed down into the chamber, he found 3 rather large skeletal remains arranged in a burial formation on elevated platforms. The largest he measured at 8 foot 7 inches, each buried with various different items. The largest individual, the 8 foot 7 skeleton, was buried with a copper blade or a tool weighing in at 12 pounds, far too heavy for a normal human to be using on a daily basis. In 1904, there is documents that state members from the Missouri State of Geology came to investigate in person, documenting their findings, which backs up finding and confirming the 10 foot by 10 foot room with 8 foot tall ceilings, tall brick structures or blocks beneath the ground, as well as finding, just as explained, 3 large skeletal remains and the copper tool or weapon and many other artifacts. Their professional notations included the extraordinary construction and the fitting of the stone blocks together. Since the technology was far too advanced for the time frame, they seemed hesitant in labeling their findings. Instead, they wrote something that it could be formerly undiscovered indigenous tribe of unknown time frame, but of exceptional skill, size, and technology. The bones were collected by the Missouri State Geology Society and were requested again to be sent to the Smithsonian for further study, apparently also vanishing. Thomas Clarkston left the structure exposed for decades on his farm for anyone that was interested in coming to take a look at them. He continued to farm around them until 1931, when he found his land was being obtained under eminent domain by the Union Power Company, with the construction of Bagnell Dam, in which his farm and many others were submerged, along with this key piece of archaeological significance. This is just one example of intentional or accidental flooding, essentially erased by what could be a monumental discovery. Not one time, not two times, not even three times, but a reoccurring theme of many different dams constructed from 1931 to 1979 in the Missouri Ozarks region alone. We move on. Table Rock Lake in 1958. They dammed the waters of the White River, flooding an additional 43,000 acres of southwest Missouri. The official press release was to harness necessary hydroelectricity, necessary for sustaining a growing and expanding population and economy. Not entirely untrue, but still a bit sketchy. But before the White River Valley was flooded, it was known for its extensive cave systems. Some of the longest caverns known to exist in all of Missouri are documented to exist in that region alone. For decades prior, many of these large caverns presented numerous giant human bones, mostly arranged in a type of funerary layout and design. In 1893, near what is today Branson, Missouri, a group of spelunkers were exploring a vast cave system on the White River when they found exceptional-sized human skeletal remains. The Springfield Republican newspaper covers this on October 12, 1893. They state, "Bones of enormous size found, buried in a secret chamber of an unknown race or tribe of people." The newspaper reported the skulls were of such exceptional size they could be fit over top of a normal human's head. It also stated the exceptional lengths of some of the arm and leg bones, which supported the accounts of giants of exceptional size, ranging as large as possibly 10 feet. Later in 1921, a more systematic study of the White River Caves was conducted by the Missouri Speleological Survey Group. They published a report in 1922, the year following, documenting their findings of numerous cavern burials. One particular larger cave that is located on what is today the deepest part of Table Rock Lake, at nearly 200 foot beneath the water, was their grandest discovery. A giant chamber with 7 intact, larger-than-life human skeletal remains arranged once again in a funeral burial-type layout. All 7 skeletons were noted to be of exceptional size. The details were precise. The smallest measured 7 foot 4 inches, with the largest measuring in at 9 foot 1 inch. The chamber itself had been worked by man, smoothing the walls, the floor, with a type of vaulted round ceiling. The skeletons were all buried with various artifacts, many with copper jewelry, beads, tools, as well as some intricate carved stone mini statues. Now, interestingly, it was noted in the document that these did not seem to match any deity or creature associated with any indigenous tribes of the entire United States region. The Missouri Speleological Group requested and suggested further analysis and study must take place at once, with their belief that this could be a pre-Columbian, formerly unknown and undocumented group of peoples. I believe this could be similar to the larger preserved Cahokia Mounds in Illinois up near St. Louis, which is, while preserved, strictly prohibited to excavate or dig up anything in the mounds to see what lies beneath them. Now, the group proposed a multi-year study in the years to come right up until the 1940s, when once again the Army Corps of Engineers started preliminary work on Table Rock Dam. In 1954, construction started. The numerous requests and suggestions of the Missouri Speleological Group seemed to be ignored and to fall on deaf ear, never to materialize. Within 4 years, in 1958, 43,000 acres of White River Valley, including the potential historical upheaval, or all that we had been taught, was flooded to the deepest portion of the lake. Those caves, the burial chambers, those skeletal remains and artifacts, if not removed, are still there today, beneath almost 200 feet of water and approximately 20 foot of mud and silt, essentially buried from existence, further discovery or analysis, just a quiet drowning deep beneath the murky waters forgotten by time. Then we come to Bull Shoals Lake, 1951. Created by damming the White River again, this time on the Arkansas border side, flooding 45,000 additional acres of northern Arkansas and southwest Missouri, again noted for flood protection downstream and needs of hydroelectric for necessary advancement. However, once again, this region of the White River Valley Basin was steeped in a long historical accounts of similar giant burial mounds and remains found in cave systems. 1936, the WPA, which is Works Progress Administration, archaeological research was conducted on the Bull Shoals region, with primary focus being on Native American indigenous sites of interest. What they found exceeded their expectations and even beyond what they could explain with historical accounts as it was written. The archaeological research endeavor excavated a burial mound near what is today Forsyth, Missouri. However, it was not a traditional mound as they had theorized. Instead, they found it had collapsed, and it was a stone structure deep beneath the earth. They found preserved and archival notes from the WPA Archaeological Group were accounts of these early findings. They noted very well constructed, fitted stone blocks, many weighing several hundred pounds, arranged in a building pattern of rectangle shape, suggestive of a foundation. Within this caved-in structure, the WAP group documented 15 complete or partially complete skeletons of unusual height and size. The 5 most complete skeleton remains were measured precisely, ranging from 7 foot 6 inches to 8 foot 11 inches. The WAP archaeological site photographed, documented, and preserved the site for decades to come. They strongly suggested an extensive further analysis and study once again be conducted of extraordinary significance, but requiring expert analysis into formerly an undocumented race of people. That request, as well as the photographs, documents, and artifacts, were filed in 1937, requesting immediate assistance. Almost to an eerie timing of response, the Army Corps of Engineers begins planning the Bull Shoals Dam and Lake project, almost like it was orchestrated, set in motion by someone calling the shots and deciding what was going to be discovered or not, and then simply wiping it from the face of the earth to add up to nothing more than exaggerated stories and conspiracy theories. In 1941, preliminary flooding maps were prepared, and by 1947, construction started on the dam. 10 years later, in 1951, the dam was completed, and the man-made lakes began to fill, wiping out the additional 45,000 square acres of river basin valleys of the Missouri and the Arkansas borders. The photographs still exist. The documentation and request reports lie in dusty file folders in rooms of the Missouri archives. But the collapsed stone structure with the 15 giant skeletons are said to have never been collected or moved. Instead, they were flooded beneath the waters of the Bull Shoals Lake. By the 1960s, the protocol and procedures, deliberate or not, was undeniable. In any larger-scale archaeological findings of giant humanoids, that had been found in the century prior up to the 60-year span had been erased, flooded, submerged, and hidden for whatever reason. One can only assume the reasons, most likely, is because it simply didn't fit the neat stories that we were all told depicted in history of our nation. The irony can be cut like a knife. The same people that ridicule storytelling and conspiracy theories were now coming unraveled and being proven we had been wrong the entire time. Instead, history became a conspiracy itself, giving Christopher Columbus the title of Discovery of the New World, when nothing could be further from the truth. He was just a political pawn being utilized in a different storytelling and conspiracy we were led to believe was well documented and accepted, but it was a lie. But it didn't stop there. It continued, covering up even more, right here in our backyard in the central United States. We circle back around to the anonymous online query near Clinton, Missouri, the statement that sparked the story. Why does the Army Corps of Engineers control recreational waters? I bring you to Truman Dam, 1979. Damming the Osage River flooded an additional 55,000 acres. The same waters controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers even today. The same with restricted waters and areas with no trespassing, much less diving. Local histories from the late 1800s and early 1900s tell of numerous large blocks being of precise construction and fitting, making up giant foundations all over. Other accounts continue with burial caves and strange mounds that were certainly man-made or influenced, not common to nature. Some were contributed to early French settlers, but still others, by scale and giant proportions, were technology advancements that seemed out of place and just were too simply easily dismissed. In 1968, as planning for Truman Dam began, archaeological surveys were now being mandated. Extensive research was dictated to ensure further destruction of possible archaeological significance in former cultures were to be preserved and protected. Perhaps we had learnt something, or perhaps, like the Smithsonian Institute, losing so many items had also kind of caught up with the Army Corps of Engineers, and it seemed surely with these new laws in place, it might preserve and protect such historical sites, even if they did not fit neatly bound in our history books. The research of the area lasted 4 years and were available for viewing, although not easily publicly highlighted or shared. The files are there and are numerous with well-documented sites of archaeological interest within the flood zone. One particular site of interest is very close to where Truman Dam is constructed. Described as a massive stone structure in rectangular design, it was 40 foot by 60 foot, made up of, again, precision-cut, fit stone blocks, many weighing well over 100 pounds each. They were documented as not fitting any known Native American indigenous people or other known architectural of the United States. This site was a bit different, almost like it could have been disturbed or robbed. Large skeletal remains were found in and around the foundation, but not as neatly preserved or displayed as the past sites. It was theorized that possibly giants once were here and possibly could have warred there on the site, and the bodies of the slain were just left, helping to resolve some of the unnatural poses of the skeletal giant remains being found both inside and outside the structure. The last documented entry stated due to strict timeline restrictions of the dam and the close proximity, time would not allow for further analysis or study. However, photographs are stated in the files to have been taken and submitted, however not found by myself. It mentioned some of the bones and the artifacts had been collected and sent off for further analysis. However, the location of these items nor their intended designation is known. All through the 1920s and the 1940s in particular was some of the most interesting historical finds here in Missouri and the Ozark region. Keep in mind, in 1922, King Tut's tomb had been discovered. all of this led to a new driven force of amateur archaeologists and spelunkers who jumped to the ability to do their own adventures here in their backyard. This all sparked a new interest, and discoveries were being made all over the United States, some factual, some adding up to nothing more than complete hoaxes. Still, from time to time, stories like this one seem to be very well documented, while in small accounts, it adds up to something larger, something more entirely.
Well, like I said earlier, I didn't find Missouri or Ozark giant lore, so I found another story, one that I had heard before, but I forgot. And so I figured that would be my contribution here. On October 16th, 1869, in Cardiff, New York, Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols were hired to dig a well behind the barn on the property of William C. Stubb Newell. In the process of digging for water, just 3 feet below the surface, they dug up something. One of the men was said to have exclaimed at the moment, "I declare, some old Indian has been buried here." What they found was a 10-foot, 4.5-inch petrified man that weighed 2,990 pounds. Now, Cardiff was already well known for its fossil deposits, and so many assumed that the body was that of an ancient man that had been petrified by the waters of the nearby swamp. And it didn't take long at all for news of the discovery to spread throughout Cardiff. The Syracuse Journal would later write of the discovery, "Men left their work, women caught up their babies, and children in numbers all hurried to the scene where the interest of that little community centered." I really think I could have been like an early 1900s newsman. I think I've got a voice for that.
You got that radio voice.
That first day, they had visitors to the site to see their discovery. The next day, property owner William Newell set up a tent and began charging visitors just 50 cents a pop for a 15-minute viewing session of the giant. Now, I say just 50 cents. It doesn't sound like much to us, but back then, that was a pretty good
50
feat.
cents, that was a chunk of change.
The number of visitors to the site over the next 4 days was said to have been as high as between 300 and 500 people per day. And the townsfolk also profited from the exhibition of the petrified giant, with the hotels and restaurants seeing more customers in those 4 days than they had ever seen before.
Publicity, it works.
Now, those who saw the giant were reminded of verses from the book of Genesis. It said, that there used to be giants on the earth. But of course, there were some people who doubted the truth of this. And with these accusations, Stubb Newell had vowed to rebury the giant and forget the whole affair, until his neighbors convinced him that this discovery might have historical value. Now, in those first few days, he had received many offers to purchase the giant, and he finally agreed to sell for $30,000 for a 3/4 stake to a syndicate of businessmen. Now, in the following weeks, experts arrived in Cardiff to look at the giant. However, the first geologist on the scene, John F. Boynton, declared that this could not be a fossilized man, but rather believed it to be a statue carved by a French Jesuit in the 16th or 17th century, simply made to impress the local Native Americans. However, some experts believe the whole affair to be a scam. A mining engineer noted that gypsum would deteriorate quickly in the soggy soil of Newell's farm. Famed Yale paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh took a quick glance at the giant and declared almost immediately that it was of, quote, a very recent origin and a most decided humbug. Andrew D. White, the first president of Cornell University, arrived to make an inspection of the discovery and declared that there was no good reason to try to dig a well in that exact spot. He believed the whole affair was undoubtedly a hoax. And of course, it actually was. It was all a hoax. New York tobacconist George Hull was intensely interested in the theory of evolution proposed by Charles Darwin, and one night got into an argument with Reverend Mr. Turk and his supporters at a Methodist revival meeting. During this argument, they were discussing Genesis 6:4, which states that giants once lived on the earth. Now, Hull was in the minority in this particular debate, and of course, lost the argument. Now, angered by such a challenge to his own personal beliefs, he wanted to prove just how easily he could fool people who wanted to believe. In 1868, Hull hired men to quarry a massive block of gypsum in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Now, he floated many stories about why he was doing this, but the most common was that that this block was intended for a monument to Abraham Lincoln in New York City. He had the block shipped to a stonecutter in Chicago, and this stonecutter hired 2 sculptors to create the giant. The giant was carved to resemble Hull himself. They carved the giant laying on its back with its right arm grasping its stomach, the left arm behind his back, one on the opposite side. One leg was crossed over the other, and there was a mysterious half smile on its face. Now, I've seen pictures of either reproductions of the original giant they made it anatomically correct. I'll say that. and I mean, it's like the statue of David, except for proportionately, like not small.
Yeah.
It's staring you right in the face, to put it bluntly. But
they're going to do a hoax.
They were
let's
thorough.
Just go all out. Yeah.
Now, they took great pains to make the sculpture look as much as possible like a petrified giant human being. They took great efforts to age the statue. They used various stains and acids. They wiped the statue with a sponge soaked in sand and water to deteriorate its appearance. They beat the surface of the statue with a board with steel knitting needles embedded in it. And after all of that, they rubbed it down with sulfuric acid to give it a deeper vintage-like color. In November of 1868, Hull had the giant statue transported by rail to his cousin's farm. And later, at the end of that month, they had the giant buried in a hole just behind the barn. By then, Hull had spent nearly $2,600, the equivalent of $63,000 in 2025, on this hoax.
Jeez.
Almost a year later, remember it would have been in October, almost a year later, in mid-October of 1869, they decided it was time to reveal the giant to the world. So he had his cousin Newell hire 2 men to come up and dig up the statue. Newell took them where it was, told them where to dig, and of course, the previous story, they dug it up, put it on exhibition. Eventually, Hull would sell his own interest in the scam for about $23,000, which would have been the equivalent of $586,000 in 2025. And these people that took the giant, they moved it to Syracuse, kind of took it on the road to display it. One of the first stops being Syracuse. And there the giant drew the eye of none other than P.T. Barnum, who immediately offered $50,000 for the statue.
They got the statue paid for.
Yeah. Well, the group refused, and Barnum hired a man to kind of covertly go in and make models like a wax casting of the giant and then duplicate it in plaster. Barnum took his giant on display in New York, and at times these giants were in the same town on display. Now, of course, Barnum claimed that his was the real genuine Cardiff giant, and that the other one on display was a fraud. Now, the gentleman who had the original Cardiff giant sued Barnum, claiming that his giant was a fake. A judge told the group of men that owned the original, he told them,
they're both fake. Shut up.
Well, that wasn't known yet. The judge told the guys who had the original to get their giant to swear to its own genuineness in court if they wanted to get, his ruling. So there was no ruling made in that particular case. The man who made Barnum's forgery wasn't content to stop at making just simply one copy of the Cardiff giant, and soon there was no less than a half dozen Cardiff giants being exhibited around the country. All of this before it was known to be a hoax. They had these giants on display. Now, on December 10th, 1869, Hull confessed everything to the press, and on February 2nd, 1870, both giants were revealed as fakes in a court of law, after the Chicago sculptors came clean to the press about their involvement. The judge in that case also ruled that Barnum could not be sued for claiming that the other giant was fake, since both giants were in fact fake.
Oh my gosh.
Now, Hull claimed that he didn't confess to the hoax out of any sort of feeling of guilt or morality. He confessed to reveal the tendency of die-hard Christians to believe in things too easily without challenging them for their veracity, and to counter the belief that giants had once roamed the earth. Now, not happy to end his career as a con man like that, George Hull would try the trick yet again in 1877 by making another 7-foot-tall giant and burying it in Colorado. He dubbed this giant the Solid Muldoon. Almost sounds like the Full Monty, kind of. And it was made of clay. Now, he toured with this statue for a brief time, but it generated very little interest and was exposed as a hoax pretty quickly, and Hull lost a lot of money in that attempt. The entire world knew that he had fooled them once. Why would they trust him now?
Exactly.
Hull died in obscurity in 1902, supposedly still pretty proud to have once fooled the whole world. Apparently, his obituary included a whole lot about the Cardiff giant and very little about Hull.
Him.
So,
in wrapping up my portion of the story, in closing, I wanted to add one tiny little tidbit of my own research. Going back to those illustrious Smithsonian Institute people who can't seem to find stuff, I wanted to find out who actually owns them, who controls them, who dictates this. Well, it is controlled by 17 members of a board of regents, which serves its governing body. It is a public-private partnership established by Congress in 1846 that functions as a trust of the U.S. government, not a typical federal agency at all. Now, the Chief Justice of the United States serves as the Chancellor. The Vice President of the United States also holds a board of office, 3 U.S. senators, 3 U.S. representatives, and 9 citizens, which are each appointed by Congress and the President. Also, they still work closely with another organization, the Army Corps of Engineers.
Well, are we ready to move on to our headlines?
I believe we are.
My headline I've pulled from this particular place before, but from 100.9 The Eagle, dated February 9th, 2026, by Doc Holliday. Book claims evidence of a legendary tribe of giants in Missouri. While Missouri does not lack for legends, it does seem to lack hard, concrete evidence about some of those legends. A very recent book is trying to change that regarding legends of a tribe of giants in southern Missouri. The author has some compelling evidence to go along with those stories. Nicholas Daigle was kind enough to share his book with the article's writer entitled Genesis 6 and the Ozarks, a compilation book on a Christian's perspective of proof that the biblical giants were right in our backyards. It is a very deep dive into the legends that have been told for years about a tribe of giants in the Ozarks and specifically in Greene County. His investigations led him to an area where the Sac River Mountain Bike Park exists, just north of Springfield. There he found a rectangular mound, the rock wall, and the rock cairn in that park that seemed to prove that prehistoric people existed in this part of Missouri. He also found a mound-like structure in the Sac Cemetery in Fulbright Springs Park using a LiDAR scan. He added in his book the following interesting history. I did discover an old hand-drawn map of Greene County that showed old Indian trails, campsites, mound locations, and burial sites. When I compared where this rectangular-shaped mound is located on the old maps, the map confirmed that this mound was a known Indian burial site. This is just a small part of what Nichols learned during his research in that part of Missouri, including local school and newspaper articles in the Springfield area in the early 1930s. If the legend of giants in Missouri is something that interests you, Eric,
Not me.
Doc highly recommends picking up Nicholas Daigle's book on Amazon. Not plugging Amazon, but, that's where you buy everything. He may very well have discovered evidence that proves these Missouri legends aren't just legends, but actual history in our state.
Interesting. Well, I decided on my headline I was going to go a little bit more fun-loving, because I felt it was pretty stringent with all my talking. And I found a headline out of the Saginaw Bay City News. That's a Michigan newspaper, dated January 16th, 2026. Flint, Michigan native Evan Baker, the 41-year-old founder of Skeleton Pizza Supply Company, aims to eat a pizza next to an oversized skeleton in all 50 states in 2026, while maintaining a streak of doing so every weekend throughout the year. The challenge grew from a spontaneous moment last October, right around Halloween, when Baker was driving home from work with a slice of pizza. After he spotted this giant skeleton bursting out of a lawn for Halloween decor, he immediately pulled the car over, went up to the doorbell, and rang the doorbell. And he asked the homeowners, "Hey, can I eat this piece of pizza on your lawn and take a photo of me eating it with the skeleton?"
What would you do if somebody asked you that?
I'd say, "You bet." Now, the homeowner agreed and received a sticker in return, I assume, of skeleton pizza.
I let a guy eat pizza in my yard, and all I got was this
All I
lousy
got was
sticker.
this lousy sticker. He says, I posted it, and he goes, everybody got really excited about it. And then I posted what I thought was the last one on Halloween, Baker said, and everybody kept pushing me to keep it going. By New Year's, Baker had completed 12 or 13 consecutive weekends without missing one, and the positive response led him to set 2 ambitious goals for 2026. Visiting giant skeletons in all 50 states and maintaining his weekend streak of all 52 weekends of the year, eating a slice of pizza with each one. Baker, who has lived his entire life across southeast Michigan, launched his apparel business in mid-August. The company sells unique clothing for pizza lovers,
I got to look into that.
though many of the design feature skeletons. After playing in bands for years and designing their merchandise, Baker paused his music career with his own life transitions underway. He needed a new creative outlet. I've always been a person who kind of needs a creative outlet, he said. So I started working on this just because I love skeletons and I love pizza. Baker's day job is a coach for a traveling soccer team. It provides a built-in travel opportunities. The position includes tournament trips and about 8 weeks off during the summer, which he expects to visit the bulk of the states. Finding oversized decorations of giant skeletons throughout the year has proven easier than expected. While skeletons are abundant during the Halloween year, Baker initially spent 45 minutes driving around Indiana before he could locate one. Now, during Thanksgiving week in Traverse City, he posted in a community Facebook page and received numerous recommendations, including a life-size metal T-Rex skeleton sculpture, which he plans on visiting and having a slab of pizza with a T-Rex skeleton. I just thought that was too good not to include and pass that.
I love pizza. I do. It's one of my favorite foods. And so when you said that, I had to look it up. And I'm looking at a t-shirt that has a skeleton holding up a slice that says, "Dead inside, but still hungry." And I may order this before the day is over.
As I was going through my script, Bill was like showing me pictures over here.
That's funny.
That's
good
artwork. Good artwork.
I do like pizza and I do like things and like that. And, there have been times I've felt dead inside. I shouldn't say that.
But still hungry.
I have a question for you, Eric.
All right.
And I need you to be honest.
Oh, gosh.
I want you to be honest.
Most of the time?
Do you think you would have fallen for the Cardiff Giant hoax if you'd been around in those days?
I don't know if I would use the word fall for it. I definitely would have been one of the first ones in line to want to go see it myself, to deduct myself. That one was a bit weird because of the weight and, with the swamp waters, the marsh and all this. You said it was like 2,000 and some pounds.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have expected, like a giant sumo wrestler being pulled out of this well or what, but I would have definitely been one of the first in lines. I would have paid my 50 cents.
I think I would have bought into it. I do.
I would have wanted to believe.
That's why I said be honest. You would have wanted to.
I would have wanted
I think I would have.
But I definitely would have been one of the first ones in line.
Yeah, I think I would have. I would have wanted to see it for sure. I mean, to be fair, you can still see replicas of the Cardiff Giant. I think the original may be on display in that original town where that quarry is from, actually. But yeah, I would have. I think I would have bought into it.
Okay. Well, my question. So what's your thoughts on this story, Bill? I know you had to roll your eyes just a bit sarcastically when I suggested another giant episode. But you know me, I do love a giant story. What about the dam waters? Do you think there's any key to that? Do you think there's any truth to that? Do you think there was a giant race in the Ozarks? Be honest.
I don't have any reason to disbelieve there were giants of, 6, 7, or 7, 8 foot tall, whatever. There's no reason to not believe in that. I don't know that I believe the military moved in to hide it. I don't think that's why they built the lakes.
Right.
But again, I also find it it's sort of like Roswell. Hey, we found a UFO, and then the next day, no, why would the Smithsonian say, hey, we have all this evidence of giants, just to turn around and be like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. We never said that.
But you have it right here in your own report that you did.
Even in our first episode where we talked about giants, there was a lot of that, and then it was shipped off to the Smithsonian. They acknowledged they received it, and then they flat out said, oh, we never received it. Oh, yeah. Well, we have proof that you received it based, whatever. I think there is a cover-up about it, and I think that I don't understand why. Like,
I'm right there with you.
I don't know why you need to cover it up. I mean, you would think the biblical people would think that provides proof that there were giants on the earth.
We're literally right in the Bible Belt here in the Ozarks. So.
And even if not, you would still think you could exploit that for dollars. Even, hey, we've got this place and we have these remains. I just don't know why it would be covered up.
The only thing I can get is that just because our history was built on a lie. I mean, let's face it, Christopher Columbus, poser.
Well, we know Leif Erikson arrived before Christopher Columbus. The Vikings were here. We have evidence of that.
Yeah.
Depending on who you talk to, there's evidence that like ancient Egyptians were in contact with the Mayans. So,
Right.
I mean, there's no reason to believe that Christopher Columbus was the first person to show up in North America. Besides, to say he was the first person to show up when there were already people here.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I don't understand why the cover up. I absolutely believe that these have been found. There's too many stories of it being found to discount it.
And it seems
sort of
like
like-
it would be a lot of work to cover it up.
It's sort of like UFOs and Bigfoot, you know, out of all the things we talk about, like I said in an episode not that long ago, you know, I don't believe in a lot of the things we talk about. I like the stories of it.
Mhm.
But I am inclined to lean towards, like, I do think that there's something to Bigfoot. I do think there's something to UFOs. There's just too many stories with too many similarities to say everybody's lying.
Yes. And there's too many, the similarities, especially for the giants. I mean, there are newspaper articles, which could be factual, could be fake. I would be the first to say that. And there was a lot of hoaxes in that time frame. But this was a time you have to consider, like I threw in 1922, I believe, King Tut's tomb. Americans were buying mummies and
Yeah.
shipping them to use as display in their living room, you know, for the elite.
We clearly didn't have any respect for remains. Why would we act like this was any different?
Yeah.
People would have made money off this if they could.
Exactly.
But I don't understand the cover up.
So, but I think there's too much out there, too many consistencies. The red hair, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
The double
The
row
double
of
rows
teeth,
of teeth.
the extra digit on the finger.
Well, and even, I mean, okay, look at the giants we know about. I will always go back to Andre. The guy was huge. But Andre had more teeth than your average human being. That's documented. You know, he was massive, and you just got to look at pictures of the guy. Watch The Princess Bride and wait till he smiles. Like, he does not have a normal amount of teeth in his mouth.
Yeah.
So I 100% believe that.
One of the, I thought, most ironic things about that story of if this was flooded, it could have been accidental, it could have been intentional. I'm not even saying that, but let's just assume there was some documented cases, which we don't even have individuals. We have different, like, Missouri Foundation societies, that said, yep, we found this foundation, we found this room, we found all this. What's the best way to preserve stuff? Being flooded in mud.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're getting to a point with technology, LiDAR and all this. Maybe they won't allow a diver down, but maybe we could slip a submersible sub down and do some LiDAR, And if there was something, let's say at the bottom of Bull Shoals Lake, 200 foot of water that's a dive. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of safety issues,
especially in Missouri lakes. They're murky.
They're murky. But what if, in an ironic twist of events, and let's say this was intentional, thinking they destroyed it, and they actually preserved it better than what it would have been?
Well, step it up, buddy.
I love that.
Get in a boat and go down there.
It's not quite warm enough yet. I don't want to do that.
Well, if you made it this far, please don't, shut it off because you're ready for us to wrap it up. Like I said, in the process of investigating this episode, I was going to do Ozark folklore in general and just call this an Ozark's Tale episode, but I did find a creature that I did do some research on, and I want to go ahead and include that because it's not enough for a full episode, and I don't know that we'll tackle like an Ozark's lore again.
And it's a fun one.
In the fall, when the Ozarks Hills are shrouded in a bluish haze, old-timers will say that haze is being created by the Snoffus. Now, most active during the early morning and late evening, especially in the fall and winter, the Snoffus is a huge white stag with antlers and deep red eyes that lives in the Ozark Mountains. Its antlers are said to be the living branches of a dogwood tree, and oftentimes have green leaves and pink blossoms growing on them. Their presence is also said to be associated with encountering flowers and leaves appearing out of season, caused by the movements of the Snoffus. It can leap from the forest floor to the tops of trees, and light upon the slenderest of branches and jump from branch to branch like a nimble squirrel, calling out in its noticeable call, "Halloo, halleloo." At other times, the Snoffus has a call like that of a songbird. And some people say that the Snoffus even have wings like the Pegasus. Now, while most tales say that the Snoffus is a benevolent creature, and much like the unicorn can only be seen by those pure of heart, others say that if you see the Snoffus 3 times, it is similar to encountering the black shuck, an omen of bad luck, evil, or death that will befall the person seeing it. as seeing an albino deer is considered a bad omen in the Ozarks. Ozark healer Brandon Weston says of the Snoffus, "The power of the white animal is its pure connection to the divine, and in this way the creature can be both a friend and a foe." Now, one origin of the story of the Snoffus states that an orchardist captured a white deer and grafted Arkansas black apple branches onto its antlers. Another version states that while out hunting, a pioneer ran out of bullets and instead loaded his gun with plum pits. Now, he took a shot at an albino deer and hit it in the head. It fell to the ground, but as he approached it, the deer survived, jumped up, and ran off. The hunter would later hear stories in the region of a white buck with plum antlers growing from its head. Now, many who talk about the Snoffus tell the story in a tongue-in-cheek manner, not taking the mystical creature seriously, and so it seems fitting that the first recorded tale of the Snoffus in publication comes from Vance Randolph's book, We Always Lie to Strangers.
I love the title.
The creature has become a symbol of the environmentalist movement in the southern U.S., and on the first Saturday of October, they celebrate Snoffus Day by taking walks in nature. Now, way back on September 5th in 2020, we talked about the Ozark Howler in episode 13, and people who know Ozark folklore say that the Snoffus and the Ozark Howler seem to represent the duality of nature. The Snoffus is the peaceful, soothing, beautiful aspect of nature, while the Ozark Howler is the terrifying, savage, and sometimes dangerous aspect of the wild.
Well put. Well put. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed a little bit more of a unique twist on an old topic and adding some new fun. But in another episode of What You'll Find on Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Hey, we appreciate you listening to us. Thank you very much.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us. If you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us, reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms. The final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.